All right, so you can see my screen, yes? You can see the deck, the slide?
Yes, it's very attractive.
Okay. All right, so we lost about 10 minutes. I'll try to speed up and still wrap up. And I think we got 55 minutes, right? So right before 1, we'll try to wrap up. Okay, so I will not waste any more time. So folks, thank you for joining. Thank you, Bill and everybody else who puts together Philly Code Camp. I think I've been there in person a couple of times, but at least we get to hang out here online and see technologies fail us at times. But yeah, this is Maui. This is if you are not fully on board with what's going on with some of the .NET things, especially with on the Xamarin side. So this may be a new term, but I'll explain. And we're not quite there yet, and there are some question marks, but at least we can talk about what the reality is right now. So I'm Sam Basu. I'm a dev advocate for Progress Software. Maybe you know us for the things we make, and that's Telerik and Kenda UI and Fiddler and all the things to make like developers a little more productive. Okay, so first up, love you all. This has been, well, last year has been a difficult year for all of us, and this year it started out maybe a little difficult, but hopefully there's hope at the end of the horizon. Hopefully we'll get back to some form of normalcy. So please take care of yourself and your families, and let's all do the best we can, juggling everything, and we'll get through this. Since this is Philly.net, I know most of you are probably around Philly, and I am still in Pennsylvania. I just love joking like I'm on the opposite corner, right by Lake Erie up north. There's a town called Erie. That's where I live, and it'll take me. So it'll take me about 7.5 to 8 hours to get to Philly if I drive, or I can get on a boat and I'll be in Canada in like 30 minutes. But I'm right up by the lake, lots of snow. Not much this year though, so I'm hanging in there. Okay, so since you are in the mobile session, I'm hoping most of you already dabble into mobile, or maybe you're thinking about mobile strategies. So before we get to Xamarin and what the present looks like, what the future looks like, this is kind of my like 1 minute spiel on all things mobile. And thankfully, you don't have to be doing one thing. There is a lot of choice, and that's a good thing. So let's just rattle off some of these broad technologies, and I'm sure there are edge cases that I'm missing. So first up, if you are doing native, then go do native, Apple, iOS, Android, or Windows. It's just a little expensive for a single person. It's a little more expensive for teams as well, because you're maintaining 3 different code bases towards supporting a single app. So again, there are legit needs for going native, but hopefully in 2021, we're looking at like cross-platform solutions. So let's talk about the web options. Again, we are going to talk Xamarin and .NET, but you don't have to do this. If you want to do web, go do web. You can absolutely make a website a very good citizen on your mobile form factors, and you could make it a mobile web, which is where it's nice and touch friendly. You could make it a progressive web application, which is a PWA, where it's a very good citizen, and you can have a mobile website where people can kind of pin your home screen or pin your icon to the home screen. You can have service workers running in the background. You can have push notifications. It's a good experience, but it's all delivered through the web. If you want to be in the app stores, though, hybrid used to be a choice, which is kind of started with PhoneGap, and then Apache took over and made it Cordova. It's still a legit strategy, but I think like people are starting to move away from that, because with the same tech, which is all of your JavaScript and CSS and HTML, if you can make a native app, why would you make a hybrid app, right? But again, for a simple line of business like forms over data apps, it's probably still fine. The whole JavaScript native story, I think, has really kind of caught on in the last few years. We have frameworks like NativeScript and React Native and Angular, whatever you want to use it with. You are truly making a native cross-platform app, and they can be in the stores. Performance is really good. The UI is native, and you can customize it to make it your own. So it's a good place to be. And then we get down to the cross-compile solutions, which is where Xamarin has always been, and it has been the most easiest thing for .NET developers to take our apps and our skills to iOS and Android or other platforms, and a few others have kind of joined. There is Flutter, which you may have heard of, which, I mean, some might say excuse me, it is not quite native because you're painting a lot of pixels with Skia, but I mean, the performance is very good, so why not? But again, you may have to do it in Dart. There is Uno platform, which again, we'll talk about some of the edge cases when it comes to Xamarin. If you want to use a different flavor of XAML, then that's for you. So this is where we stand, and it's good to have choices, right? Let's talk about .NET because what we will do is, like, although I'm talking about MAUI, none of this is ready right now. So we have to talk about what is present, and then we'll talk about what the future maybe holds. Some of these, I'm sure you have seen these slides from Microsoft. This is a good place to be, I think, for .NET developers. This is where we were earlier in the year, in 2020. Prior to .NET 5, we had a couple of different .NETs, and Xamarin has always been running on top of Mono. So you have Framework, you have Core, and you have Mono. And they didn't want these different runtimes, so they're trying to combine it all in .NET 5. Some of the work is already done, some of the work is still left to be done, particularly on the Xamarin front. So today we are all looking at .NET 5, which is nice. It's a big unification effort. So the tools of our trade have come a long way. You got Visual Studio on Windows and Mac. I'm on a Mac today, so you will see me use VS for Mac or VS Code, but it works the same way on Windows. Probably crashes like once or twice a week as compared to like maybe 10 times on Windows. It's still a little lightweight. But again, this is a good story with .NET 5. Xamarin, again, if you have never touched Xamarin, just my 1 minute overview. We won't spend a whole lot of time here, but again, look things up. It's a good place to be. It's a happy place for .NET developers. You are making truly native, truly cross-platform apps from a single code base. And you're, again, as a .NET developer, you probably don't want to learn a whole lot of iOS or Android towards making these apps, and Xamarin is the way to get around that. So this is kind of where this started. This was the traditional native Xamarin, which is now called like Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Android. There are thoughts about calling this .NET for iOS and .NET for Android going forward. This is where we first learned that you can write a shared C# logic, your business logic, and then you write the heads separately for iOS, Android, and Windows. But again, you are writing those heads separately. But this came along probably about 5 years back now, Xamarin Forms, or maybe even a little bit more. And this took off in terms of popularity because, again, you are able to write this like shared UI code. You are getting an abstraction, and you can write that abstraction in C# or you can write that in XAML. If you have not heard of XAML, it's an extended, simple, lightweight markup language that lets you define the visual tree. And then at runtime, that gets translated or rendered as native UI on every platform that you're on. So that's the promise. I have some of these things, which I don't think these are questions anymore, like when should you use what. If you have a real good need for going platform specific, go for it. But I would almost always start with Xamarin Forms nowadays because it's just the easier thing to do. And I'll try to show you if I can. You can get down into native land. You can render things natively for iOS or Android anytime you want. And you can mix and match forms with Xamarin Native. I am talking a little bit quick here, but yeah, everybody just feel free to chime in and ask some questions. I'm going to keep the chat window open. What's your view on the other tools? Rajiv is asking that give you a good experience in developing different platforms, Android and iPhone at the same time, besides Xamarin. Okay, my views, and again, my 2 cents, right? And we'll talk about this. This has been a bit of an issue for Xamarin, actually, because .NET, and given how it's compiling things down into native binaries, the dev loop, which developers like, where we write some code and we want to see it live in the simulator, it's been a little slow. Particularly compared to the other counterparts like Flutter, or if you're doing React Native or NativeScript, that's very, very fast because they have things like Webpack and they can, everything is a component, so they can pack it up and ship it quicker. But Xamarin is catching up quite a bit. I know almost everybody on the Xamarin PMs and engineering teams. They're very, very good, and they're listening, and they have things called like hot reload or hot restart. So you can edit some XAML, and you are getting to a point where you can edit some C# and also see it live, updating pretty quickly on the simulators as well as on the actual iOS or Android devices. So again, Rajiv, that's my two cents. I'm comfortable coming from a heavy .NET background. I feel comfortable in Xamarin, but again, look around and again, pick the best tools for what you're trying to do. Okay, so back to the slide. So yeah, again, start with Xamarin Forms if you want to do that. These are some things that kind of help you out. Again, since you're writing Xamarin, you want to write XAML in C#, so you don't want to write these like platform-specific APIs and sensors that are loaded on our phones. There's some help. These used to be open source libraries that a whole bunch of us maintained, but now it's just all one place, one NuGet package, and you have like 30 or so APIs for each device. And you can just write C# to get access to these APIs. They are actually a little careful in the way they do some tree shaking. So if you get this and just use one API, they're careful not to give you or not to bloat up your app package. So again, good things happening. Whatever you do, though, it is native. In fact, this is an older slide. Android is not JIT anymore, or it used to be JIT, but now it's just fully precompiled. So everything is very fast and totally native. Until we developers shoot ourselves in the foot, right? And everything is open source, right? Again, you may have seen the slide. So Xamarin used to be a little expensive per developer, per platform, but again, since 2016, Xamarin is part of Microsoft, and everything is open source. There is no barrier to entry. There are some little tools that are still paid for, but those are really for enterprises. Otherwise, it's free. Everything is free. Xamarin Productivity, again, this is like where we stand right now. They just pushed out Xamarin Forms 5.0 update. That has a bunch of things in it. So folks like Matty Leger, David Ortno, James Montemagno, those are the folks on the social platforms to follow. And they have put in a lot of work, a bunch of new UI, a lot of updates to the shell. Like I said, a hot reload and hot restart are very nicely done. They are working with different types of brushes and gradients. So a lot of love being put into Xamarin Forms. And again, they're tightening up that dev loop as much as they can. This one's a little glimpse of hot reload. You can see that, I mean, for any project you can, this one's actually showing some of the Telerik UI, which again, you don't have to use it, but just to show you an example. So a bunch of XAML you can edit on the fly, and hang on, Alexa, do not disturb me. This is the downside of having a smart home. Things just light up and just random announcements, right? But it's fun to kind of turn on lights or turn off lights at your beck and call. So anyways, so this is hot reload. This is something I use and I'm fond of it. Again, mobile is not easy. It's not just fire and forget. There are things you have to do about testing and making sure you collect analytics and how you are distributing your app. Maybe you don't want to go to the store, app stores. You want to have an enterprise distribution. So Microsoft's solution for all of that is App Center, which is actually a very nice tool. It works with your CI/CD builds and you're pushing out code. You can automate a lot of things. Now let's talk about some of the things that are kind of outliers, but you can do all of those things right now. So Xamarin Forms, it's not just for iOS or Android anymore. Again, since it's been open source, people have stepped up. The community has written what's called renderers. So you see this diagram. This is how Xamarin Forms operates, but there is still that purple, the green, and the blue because there is a piece of code that renders the native UI for each platform, given the C# or the XAML. So they have written renderers for other platforms, so you can run it on a Mac or on WPF, for example, or Linux, GTK Linux. If you have not heard, Tizen is an operating system that Samsung makes, and your fridge or your TV is likely running Samsung or Tizen if it's a Samsung one. So again, a lot more places your apps can be. This is got nothing to do with Xamarin, but it's very similar tech. So I mentioned this. Again, as a .NET developer, these are all options. So if you are looking to use the Windows XAML, so Xamarin Forms XAML is a little different dialect of XAML. If you want to use the Windows XAML, then you get to write UWP applications which run on everything Windows, and they are giving it a reboot with WinUI. They're separating out the UI stack and separating it from Windows releases, and that'll run on Win32 apps and UWP apps. So that's a good place to be. You have dual screen devices coming out. You have one that is running Android. You'll have hopefully Windows 10 X run Neo and Duo. Those are the two. Again, more kind of mix and matching. I'll try to show you maybe a couple of these things. If you're on a Mac like me, you know that Apple is trying to get iOS apps to run on Mac, so you have more surface area and your apps just run on a Mac. So it just gives you a bigger audience and your apps are running on desktop. What's not to like? And then those apps can be all written with Xamarin Forms. Let me check the chat room here. Okay, yeah, no more questions. Keep them coming if you have any. So that's called Catalyst in the Mac world. These are actually some folks kind of right across the pond from me. These are they're in Montreal in Canada, and they have taken UWP or Windows XAML, and they have made the bridges so you can go to iOS or Android. Or also WebAssembly if you wanted to get back to the browser. So this is Uno platform. So take a look. They literally stand on top of Mono and Xamarin. So nothing spectacular, but just their form of XAML is different and it's nice. Speaking of WebAssembly and Blazor, which I'm sure Fritz was on today, and I saw a few more sessions on Blazor. This is all over the place, and it's understandable how exciting this is because if you're a C# and .NET guy, now you can do .NET front and back. You had Blazor, which was server-side first, and now it's also client-side, fully in WebAssembly. What people don't talk a whole lot about, and what's important to us as mobile devs, is the implications of Blazor for desktop and mobile. So you can absolutely write PWAs very nicely with Blazor. They can run with the SignalR front end, or they can be completely client-side with WebAssembly. And as I'll show you, there's actually a way to write native mobile apps running on top of Xamarin with Blazor. And again, all of this is experimental, but you can see the promise of where some of these things are going. Okay, so I'm 30 minutes in, well, maybe 20 minutes in because we had tech issues. Let's talk about MAUI. So this is the future, and you can play around with this, but you cannot write production apps with this yet. Let me turn off my windows completely here. So this is coming, and you may have heard some of this coming out of like Build or .NET Conf last year, and you may have also heard a little bit of remorse and doubts as to whether this is happening, when this is happening. I think the reality is like nobody knows right now, and we'll see when these things fit. For now, the goal is still .NET 6 and end of 2021, but it might slip a little bit. But all of the things that make up MAUI are definitely happening because the engineering teams are working on it. So this is kind of an evolution of Xamarin Forms, essentially. So make the tools better, make them more performant, reach out to more platforms, and make things a little more standardized is what MAUI is all about. So MAUI stands for multi-application UI platform, right? So you get the same platform reach, and yes, you'll be able to go to Windows and Mac OS for desktop, and in addition to iOS and Android, I'm sure you can go to Tizen and other smartwatches. Some of the things they're doing are actually nice for developers where it's a single project experience, things like fonts and other resources are kind of embedded more nicely. The builds are smarter and faster. So all good things. Now, again, if you come from a heavy C# and XAML background, like I'm old. I did a lot of WPF. I did Silverlight. So this is kind of a walled garden. It's nice when you're here. You got great tools. Some of the platforms that or frameworks or patterns that we use are the most common patterns like Mvvm is very popular, which is model view model. Again, the frameworks don't have anything to do with the design patterns themselves, and part of much of Mvvm is actually built into Xamarin Forms. But again, if you're working on a bigger team, if you want to bring in a framework, you're welcome to bring in Prism or Mvvm Cross or Mvvm Lite. This is also something new, and this is what's being considered. So there are what .NET MAUI is considering is opening the funnel. So why only make Xamarin for C# and XAML devs? Why not invite the web guys to come and join us? So they're opening it up to Blazor. They're opening it up to MVU, which is the model view update pattern. If you did any Elixir or any other like web platforms, they use a very common like MVC or MVU pattern. Here, you don't really have a view model. You essentially have a model which is not just your data, it's just the application state, which is meant to be immutable. And then you pass it around and you render the UI, and anything that needs to update, you have an update loop that updates the model. And then you can keep the states around and you navigate, and so on and so forth. There's an experimental product or UI library where you can play around with Xamarin Forms or .NET MAUI supporting the MVU pattern. I'll try to show you that in probably 5 minutes. Okay, so modern UI for Xamarin, what I mean by this is if you are building Xamarin apps, please don't reinvent the wheel. These things have been done. You get about 30, 35 UI controls, and by UI controls, I mean the abstractions. So you can write a text box or a button or a list view or a grid, and it renders the corresponding native things, but that's not enough. You probably need some help when you're shipping like professional software. So this is my little pitch. Again, you may have heard of Delegate. We make tools for all of .NET, and we have a tool for Xamarin, which is our UI suite. This is one that I work with a lot, so I'm obviously biased. My point is like the things like grids and charts and side drawers and busy indicators. These are not things you want to do by hand, and by all means, look around. Okay, there are others. Obviously, competition keeps us all on our feet. So look around and get the right tools for your Xamarin apps. Let me see. Chat room. Rajiv is saying, being a regular .NET dev, if I'm going ahead with creating a web app that will eventually be a mobile app using Xamarin as well, can you please share what best practice? Oh, okay. Okay. That's a good question, actually, Raju. Thank you for asking that. So what Raju is asking is, if you're building a web app today, what can you do to share code better with mobile? So a couple of different ways you can do this. Again, if you are leaning towards building JavaScript-based like SPA applications, a lot of those things can be shared, especially if you're doing Angular or Vue. Those things can be shared very nicely between web and mobile. On the .NET front, like ASP.NET, you can make like kind of a mobile web type things, but if you have to make a real native app, then your options get a little limited unless you look at some of the upcoming things. So you can always make a .NET standard library where you're sharing business logic, but you can't share UI code as much because it's just different. But if you are doing Blazor, then you can share some UI code as well. So again, this may not be quite as ready, Rajiv, but it's coming, right? So let's talk about more. I'll try to show you some more. Okay, and which brings me to some demos. So yeah, keep the questions coming, folks. What time is it? 35 minutes out. So let me switch over and maybe try showing you some of these things, and then we'll see how much we can show. I can show you demos all day long because this is what I do. So let's see, where do we start? Let's start here. Maybe let me start with something super simple, kind of a hello world mobile app, just to kind of show you, if you've never done Xamarin, like the reach and how you go about doing things. So let's pull down some app from a cloud service and just show it in our app, because most mobile apps end up being like a list of things, right? So this one here is a simple Xamarin Forms app, and you can start this with file new project, or you can start this in, the CLI stuff is getting worked in, the command line stuff, but it's file new project on Visual Studio. So this is what you get. You get a .NET standard library that is shared, and then you get platform specific projects. I don't have Android here, but you can share. You can have UWP if you're supporting Windows as well. So let me change this to an iPhone configuration, and then we can run it. So here's what I'm doing. So I'm going to a URL here. I think I have it bookmarked here, just to kind of showcase a RESTful endpoint. I use this for testing stuff. It's nice. I'm sure there are a lot more things that many of you use. So essentially they have resources, and I'm going after like a bunch of posts here. So it gives you back things in Latin. So it's nice. So it's got title, body, and I think they give you like 100 posts and so on. So in this app, it's a super simple kind of hello world Xamarin Forms app. Let me bump up my fonts a little bit so you can read better. So here's my RESTful endpoint, and I'm starting off with a page that will show me a list of things. These are kind of standard things in Xamarin, by the way. You get an on start. These are event handlers. You do not get an on kill thing. So if your user is running your app for a long time, eventually it's just sitting there to excuse me, taking on resources. So the OS is eventually going to kill it. You do not get notified. So please save your state on sleep. So beyond that, I have a simple like a POCO object, and I'm dating myself. A POCO is a plain old CLR object. It's a simple .NET object essentially. So it's a class that mimics what I'm supposed to get back from the cloud. And then I have a helper class, which is going to give me a way to, it has an HTTP client, and it's going to go pull down stuff from that RESTful endpoint. And I'm using Newton South JSON. You don't have to. The system.net JSON has come a long way. So just deserialize it, and then I'm creating an observable collection, which is a special C# generic, so I can bind it to my UI, and then I have like two-way data binding. That's all. And then I have, this is a little bit of XAML, which is how you define the visual tree in Xamarin. You don't have to do XAML. You can do this all in C#, but I have a list view, and I want to just show the list of things coming down. And this is the code behind. And again, if you're doing Mvvm, you would likely not have much of a code behind. You will have clear separation of patterns, but this is just a demo. So I'm pulling it down and I'm binding it to my item source on the list view. Okay. So just one-on-one stuff, and I'm going to show you the same app maybe in a couple of different ways so you get the feel of it. So let me start this up. And since I am on a Mac, it should know that, oh, I apparently haven't done this build in a while, so it's doing a fresh build. So give it a second. So it already knows that I have Xcode installed, and it knows to go and pull up my iOS simulator. And you can deploy straight to your devices as well. And a question we get a lot is, if you're doing Xamarin, would you need an Apple device if you're supporting iOS? The answer is yes and no. You do need a Mac that will do the build, and the Mac could be physical somewhere on your network, or it needs to be somewhere in the cloud. I think App Center will do iOS builds for you. There's Mac in the cloud if you don't have a Mac. So there are ways to get a Mac and just do a build. And then with Visual Studio, you can actually get a Windows simulator, so you don't have to ever look at the iOS simulator. You can just hit F5 from Visual Studio, and it pulls it up. So here's the app, super simple, just a list of 100 posts that are coming back from the cloud, right? So this is kind of one-on-one, but now take a look at this one here, which is what I was getting to. I have another project here, which I'm going to set that as the startup project, which you can obviously tell where I'm going with this. This is the power and the flexibility of Xamarin Forms in a way. So now I just flipped the startup project, and now you're going to see the same exact app, hopefully, if my build succeeds. And here we go. So now it's a native desktop application. Okay, it's a native macOS application. It's what do you call it? It shrinks and grows, and you have the same list. You have the same way to search through it. So this is again the power of Xamarin Forms and those special renderers that can get you everywhere. And all I have to do, like the Mac project here, there is nothing in it. So if you look at the app delegate, the only thing we do in the app delegate on the Mac side, let me bump up the fonts here. It's too big. Come back down. Okay, so we are newing up a window, and we're giving it some dimensions, and then forms.init. This is what we do to initialize Xamarin Forms, and then we are saying go let Xamarin Forms paint the UI for that window, and now you have a desktop application. You can do the exact same thing with WPF for Tizen and other platforms. So it just makes it nice and easy. So let's switch a little bit, and let's look at the same app maybe. Where's it going to be? Maybe this one here. So now we're talking Blazor, okay? And again, this is all a little experimental. This is meant to be in Maui, so don't build production apps yet, but you should be able to do this eventually. So what I'm showing you here is if you do a search, can folks still hear me, see me? Yeah, I hope so. Please speak up if I'm not. Not that. Let me see. Blazor, I thought I had it here. Yep, there you go. So this is what I'm showing you. Mobile Blazor binding is experimental. So it's essentially, I mean, there is no magic here. Essentially, this is just a wrapper. So we can invite the cooler folks into the mobile land, the folks who do web and the folks who do Blazor. So Rajiv, what you were asking, like you can actually share the routes. You can share some of the components between your mobile and your website. So this is essentially just syntactical sugar on top of Xamarin Forms. This is exactly what Xamarin Forms does, except you're not writing XAML in C#, you're writing Blazor. So let's see, any questions? Okay, no more. So that's what I'm showing you here. So let me go over and maybe just show you the dependencies here. So you notice that it has Xamarin Forms in this project, and there's a CLI template, so you can start off with a file new project. Once you have it, this is kind of what you want to do to kind of not write XAML. So here, there's imports, which brings in all of the Blazor specific namespaces that we need. And then I have the same like post object. I have a post manager that knows how to pull it down, same thing. But now everything is a component, everything is Razor, right? So here I have a little component that's meant to display each post as it's coming down from the server. From the cloud service, essentially. So this one here is a stack layout, and it's using a label. Kind of looks like Xamarin Forms if you have done any Xamarin Forms, but this is, again, it's Xamarin Forms behind the scenes, but you're writing it as Blazor. So this will feel very familiar, like the at code and all of the business logic that you write. You don't have to write in the same file. Like I'm old, I've done web forms, and this is like spaghetti code. You're mixing up markup and code too closely together. So if you want, just split it out. So that's my one component. And then what I have here is another component called Hello World. This is essentially the first page. So here's a content view, which essentially gives you a Xamarin Forms view or a page. Inside of it is stack layout. There's a couple of buttons in here, and then there's a scroll view. So we are iterating over every post, and this posts is what we got down from the service. You'll notice that I'm doing a fetch, which is using the service to go and fetch the data down. And for each post, we are rendering this component. So this kind of looks a little bit like React if you have done any React. So we are repeating the component for every post that we have to display. And we're just passing in the actual post object down. Yeah, so let's go ahead and run this just to kind of show you the same app now done with Blazor. Maybe. There you go. Where's my simulator? There, it's coming up. Okay, so same app, doesn't look any different, but done a little differently because I'm not writing Xamarin Forms. Now I'm writing Blazor as intended with .NET MAUI. Oh, one fun thing you'll see is this is a little button. So when I do the flip, maybe, there you go. So it's not flipping the text quite often, but it's flipping it. So even with Blazor, you do have access to the native buttons. So essentially that button is a native iOS button, right? And you can get access to the button, and then you can get to any native controls and properties and event handlers of that button, even from Blazor if you wanted to. So that's just real quick Blazor. I think I have maybe 7-8 minutes more left. Let me see, what else can I show you? How many of you are in the chat room? Okay, about 14 of you. That's good. Yeah, ask away questions if you want. This is all Teams. We are not on the internet. This is all, unless like Bill is probably saving it and making us internet famous. I don't know. My camera stays on all day long, so I don't care. Let's see. What else can we talk about? Oh, let's talk about the MVU pattern. Let's see. Maybe this one here. So before I pull this up, essentially what I'm showing you is, do I have it bookmarked? I might, yeah. So there's this gentleman named James Clancy, works on the Xamarin engineering team, very smart guy, and he's been playing around, and this is kind of our playground until .NET MAUI is ready. This is our playground to kind of look around and see what this might have. So this is MVU, and he kind of explains what it is. And then this is funny, so you might get a kick out of this. So let me do a search on .NET MAUI. So this was last year when they first started talking about it, right around build, which was in May. And they talked about what MAUI could be, and the two Scots came on, Hanselman and Hunter came on and talked about it, the single project experience, and they talked about Mvvm, and then they talked about MVU, which comes from, I misspoke, it's not Elixir, it's actually Elm that uses MVU quite a bit. So they pointed to this blog post by this gentleman named Thomas Band. I think he's from Germany. So again, if you're just kind of curious about design patterns and like how they work, this is one of the best posts I found. Excuse me, when it comes to MVU, he really talks about like all the right ways of doing it, the init method, the update method, how you update the model, what part of it is immutable, and so on. So Microsoft pointed to his blog post to say, go learn MVU, and then He made a subsequent blog post to say, yeah, by the way, what you're doing is not really MVU, but I think it's okay because again, it's a design pattern, right? So it's open to a little bit of interpretation, and I think that's what Microsoft is doing here. With, or again, it's not granted that this is how it will end up, but that's the playground for now. So this is a thing called Comet. So take a look at Comet Io. And essentially what this does is a thing like this. So here you will see that this is again file new project and it's done with a CLI. Here we are actually not using Xamarin Forms, and this is part of what is going on into or under the covers of Xamarin as we go into 2021 and moving forward. So they had a lot of code in terms of renderers, which takes a XAML and then renders or takes C# and renders native UI. That's the part they're kind of redoing it, kind of making it universal. So if you're coming from Blazor or if you're coming from MVU, you can use the same renders and they're not tied as closely to XAML and C#. So that's what this one is actually using. So here you will see that there is no XAML. This is just a plain CS file. And let me go ahead and run this. No, not on the iPod Touch. I don't know why that's the default with anytime you update your iOS SDKs. All right, start. Maybe. I got 6 more minutes until build kicks me off. That's all right. I'm here. You know where to reach me. I'll give you my Twitter handle again. Okay, so this is the classic hello world, right? So you got an increment counter. So obviously, as I keep pressing the button, that goes up, right? Nothing magical. Now, what is different is how you're defining this, and it's completely different. There is no XAML. You're essentially defining everything in C#, and this, by the way, is the MVU loop. So you'll see that there's a state, which is essentially the model. So the counter is the state which we carry around. And then we have this whole method called the view, essentially, which is defining the body. This is the entire visual tree. And this is the one that's been painted over and over and over again. But there's some smartness here. They're not repainting the things that have not changed. They're only touching the things that have changed. So here you're defining a text block, and then you're defining a button. There's a little delegate function here which updates the button count. And when you're doing that count value update, the text box obviously updates itself. So again, nothing spectacular, maybe even a little verbose, but you can see the promise where you are literally just writing C# and everything in Visual Studio. And there's no XAML, you're just doing a loop where everything is in this update thing, and that's how your UI is to be painted.
So Sam, in this
yeah.
code, so view and v stack. No, put the code back up.
Yeah, sorry. Yep.
The view and the v stack. That's part of the view class that you're inheriting from.
In a way, yes. So this view class is actually coming from Comet, and it is very similar to what the content view class is in Xamarin Forms. It's just kind of the view, the placeholder for the whole page. And within that, you got things like this one's a vertical stack, right? It stacks things vertically. Yeah. There's a H stack for horizontally. There's a Z stack, which will get very confusing if you don't know how the Z index thing is, just like layering things on top. So it's got similarities with Xamarin Forms, but you're just writing C#. And again, the Flutter and the React Native guys are actually very open to this, which is why I think Microsoft is making it more accessible if you're coming from those backgrounds.
Yeah, I like this. I like this approach. Now, the body attribute above view body, what does that do?
I don't know. I do not know. Apparently,
you just pasted it in there. Okay.
Yeah. Let me. I think like it declares that this is the body.
It's all right. It's just this is so different.
It is very different. Let me see if I have another example where if I was doing the same thing. No, apparently, I think this is what they always use. So this is an example where I'm using some H stacks, and this one's taking a password, and then it's got a button. So again, like as a Xamarin Forms developer, this looks a little different, but again, different doesn't mean scary, right? And maybe the Xamarin Forms audience isn't the one that's going to jump at it. The people who are going to like this are the folks who come from a heavy web or Flutter background. So let me see if this will actually still run. Same example, but it kind of gives you that data binding thing. Becomes a little more apparent what it is. Let me see. Go to the build. Build. There. Okay. So here, okay. So I was trying to mimic like a login thing. Username is Sam. My password is Bill. And how much do I care about security? I think this one was just so just to kind of show you like this this security value. It's a float, right? And we are binding that to this slider here. So, see how different this is. So the value of the slider is bound to the security value, and it can go from 0 to 100, and the increments are like 0.1f. So when you actually run it, you get a slider like this, which shows you the exact like braveness value that's underneath. So it is two-way binding in a way, but it's just done very differently. You're not binding a specific object to a UI. You are rather doing everything in that update loop so that whenever one aspect of the object model changes, the UI updates itself and so on. So that's just the MVU pattern in a nutshell. Again, new and upcoming. So I'm at time. I'm going to stop here and just going to go back to where we left off. The only things I will say is these are maybe early days with MAUI, and there's some doubt as to when this is going to land. But all of the components of what is promised in MAUI will happen sooner rather than later. So again, look at all the ammunition we have as software developers. You don't need to Xamarin unless I sold you on it, but do the web if you wanted to. Do .NET, do JavaScript, do however you want to reach mobile audiences. And let's go build amazing apps. If you want to hang out a little bit more with me, I am on Twitch quite a bit. As you can tell from the green screen, I'm lazy to pull this thing down. But this is not just me. It's just a couple of other folks as well. We stream all the time. And that's me again on social media, Skype, GitHub, Twitter, you name it. So yeah, reach out and let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what you find concerning or what you find exciting. So let me check the chat room. Any more questions? Oh, Rajiv, can you please share good links for learning Xamarin, Xamarin Forms? Okay, that's a good question again. So the learning curve for .NET guys should not be much. Again, start with the docs. Okay, do a search on Xamarin Forms docs. They really have poured in a lot of love into the docs because again, that's where people start and they struggle. So start with the docs. They have sample applications that you can download and play around. There are lots of resources. If you search for like specific Xamarin Forms topics, there are lots of blogs you'll find, but I would almost always say start with the docs. They have poured in a lot of effort. They take community pull requests a lot. Everything is open source. I actually have some like 90 builds of Xamarin Forms. It's not that big of a project. So let's all collaborate and contribute back when it makes sense. And yeah, just have fun and thank you for having me. Hopefully this was somewhat of a fun 45 to 50 minutes. Sorry about my tech issues, but thank you so much.